Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Providence, where we love beyond belief. We have a special service this morning, special to me. It's a topic that I've long been fascinated by, and I thought I should start by talking a little bit about the fact that we have a sort of semi-academic topic today. When I was at divinity school studying for parish ministry with my Master of Divinity degree, I loved all the study part, and I began to think maybe I should just stay and do a doctorate and just suck in as much as I possibly can. And maybe I'll even be an academic after all. I don't know. We'll have to see. So I was doing my studies, and I was also working as a student minister at the same time. And I was studying this kind of stuff, although the Gospel of Judas had not been published yet, so this was not one of the exact things I was studying. And that's how I saw that things that were old hat at the divinity school, things that had been established and agreed upon by mainstream Bible scholars 2 generations before, were still unknown by people in the pews. One of the biggest things that I learned was that the sections of the Pauline epistles where Paul tells women to sit down and shut up in church, it's basically that. It's not much more polite than that. Are not considered by most mainstream biblical, actually by all mainstream biblical scholars, to actually be authentic. I have a colleague with us today who's starting to attend, and she's like, right, they weren't actually Paul. They're interpolations that were added later to these Pauline epistles by people who wanted Paul's authority behind what they were saying. But they're not, yes, wow, it's so shocking. But they're not Pauline, and the ways that we know this are, first of all, Paul was not worried with what women were doing in the church. In fact, his whole letter to the Philippians is to a woman who's running a house church, Lydia. He was concerned with those churches existing at all and whether they understood themselves to be open to people who were not already Jewish, which they should be, right? There's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, all are one in Christ Jesus. That was Paul in Galatians. So he was not concerned with women being oppressed. That was like a 2nd and 3rd generation issue in early Christianity. But somebody who did care 2 or 3 generations later was like, I need Paul to say this. And he stuck it in the epistles, and it ended up getting into the canon. The language and the grammar are different from what Paul used. It's not just that this wasn't really a burning issue at the time. The language is literally different. They got stuck in there, and then women were told to sit down and shut up because Paul said so for century upon century. And by the time I got to divinity school, this was common knowledge at school, and nobody knew it at the Unitarian Universalist church I was serving. Unitarian Universalists, we like to be informed. We're pretty progressive. We're pretty feminist. You'd think if anybody knew this, it would be the Unitarian Universalists. And we didn't. And this is why I didn't ultimately stay for the PhD. I got 2 degrees and then I left. Because I thought there's no point in continuing to advance this knowledge if it doesn't get out to the people in the pews whose lives are being affected by what the Bible supposedly says. So this is why we are doing this topic this morning. May we make the very most of this beautiful day we have been given, starting now together. So this is our time to greet each other. People sitting right next to us, people sitting at the furthest corner away, long familiar faces, brand new faces. Let's make sure everyone is warmly greeted and welcomed and knows how glad we are to be together today. Chalice. I guess we'll chat for that.
Liz.
And now before we regain our seats, can we just turn around and wave to everybody who's joining us at home, to the cameras that are to the right of the organ. Hi, everybody at home. Good morning. Can we say it together? 1, 2, 3. Good morning. And it's good to be together this way as well. Now, our worship associate, Kai Robert Speaker, is going to lead us in the words for our chalice lighting that's printed in the order of service.
This light burns also in our hearts, and it lights the way towards harmony, justice, and hope for all.
Our opening words this morning are from the writing of Unitarian Universalist Francis C. Anderson, Jr. Through dreary, sodden days, the field sponged up the graying skies. And now the sun lies soft as birth again, as if the earth had just begun, and blossoms on the vines designed in spring come out to sing again. And everywhere the ripening pushes fallen leaves apart to free the heart for freshening. As through the seasons of our years, becoming often waits the nourishment of tears. Can we all share together in our covenant? It's printed in the order of service. Everybody is welcome to say this, newcomers and visitors as well, but no one is required to, except for our members, who really must. We, the members of the First Unitarian Church of Providence, with respect for the worth and dignity of each person, with wonder at the light we know by many names, and with gratitude for our deep connection to each other and to the larger web of existence, covenant to walk together in our search for truth, seeking the paths of wisdom, compassion, and justice. And our opening hymn is number 107, Now Sing We of the Brave of Old. Can we rise in body or spirit and sing out?
For today's reading, we have some excerpts from the Gospel of Judas. And as you can see on the cover of your order of service, it's pretty weathered. So there is missing information, and the sentences sometimes are not complete. And I'm going to denote that in the reading by just an elongated pause. In the first excerpt, Judas asks about his own fate. Judas said, "Master, could it be that my seed, my divine spark, is under control of the rulers?" Jesus answered and said to him, "Come. But that you will grieve much when you see the kingdom and all its generation." When he heard this, Judas said to him, "What good is it that I have received it? For you have set me apart from that generation." Jesus answered and said, "You will become the 13th, and you will be cursed by other generations, and you will come to rule over them. The last days they will curse your ascent to the holy generation." In our second excerpt here, Jesus speaks of those who are baptized and of Judas's betrayal. Judas said to Jesus, "Look, what will those who have been baptized in your name do?" Jesus said, "Truly, I say to you, this baptism, my name, to me. Truly, I say to you, Judas, those who offer sacrifices to Sockless, the false angel, everything that is evil, but you will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the fleshly body of the man that clothes me. Already your horn has been raised, your wrath has been kindled, your star has shone brightly, and your heart has become strong."
Something like Good morning and happy Earth Day, everyone. We will now share the joys and the sorrows that we carry on our hearts in this beloved community. From Peter Mallon, a candle of sorrow for Barbara Mallon, newly gathered to God's glory. From Janet Downing Taylor, a candle of joy, many belated candles of joy for the performances at last week's Musicale, and much thanks to David House, who made it all happen, and also for the delicious reception that followed. From the lay ministers team, a candle of recovery. Nancy Schaefer has had knee surgery and is doing well this week. From Merritt Meyer, a candle of thanks for the celebration of life service for Susan Meyer, which happened here yesterday. And these beautiful flowers, by the way, are from Merritt. Thanks to all, including and especially my sister, Barbara Meyer Ellish. A candle of gratitude for something that hasn't happened yet. My future self gives thanks in the present. A candle of hope for my mother, who's expecting some serious test results regarding her health. May we all be at peace, whatever the outcome. And finally, a candle of joy and celebration that Victoria has made her way back to the keyboard. And finally, her daughter Amy was married in Israel. Remember, we tried that last November. So congratulations to Amy and welcome back to Victoria. As we move into the time of meditation and prayer and reflection, I invite you to bring yourselves fully present and here. Find your breath. Let yourselves relax. Feel yourselves where you are. Please take a deep breath. And again. One more breath. A prayer for Earth Day. Our Mother, whose body is the earth, sacred is thy being. May thy gardens grow and thy rivers flow. May you be sustained as you sustain us. Accept our gratitude for every gift and every harvest. For yours is the beauty and the majesty of all creation. From dawn to dusk and dawn again, from life's beginning to its very end. Amen. Now we're going to move into a time of silence. If you've lost someone this past year, you're welcome to stand in tribute to those lost loves or to raise your hand, those of you at home. We remember that.
As it says in your order of service, the title of this sermon is The Gospel According to Who? That's right, Judas. Most of us are familiar with the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The word gospel means not truth, but good news. Gospel accounts were not written as ancient journalism to give people accurate information about what was going on. Concepts like bias did not have the modern applications that we give them. Gospels were written to offer a person's take on a story. They were interpretive. They were written from a particular perspective and often with a particular audience in mind. Indeed, that is all demonstrably true for each of the four Gospels in the New Testament. Most of what we know about other Gospels, not the four in the New Testament, and other forms of Christianity comes ironically from the writings of a 2nd century Greek bishop named Irenaeus. And Irenaeus is famous for, among other things, working to establish legitimate Christianity and illegitimate heretical Christianity. For a long time, Irenaeus' writing attacking other forms of Christianity and their scriptures, especially the Gnostics, were almost the only window we had into early other understandings of Christianity. And then in 1945, a bunch of ancient writings contained in codices, books, in other words, not scrolls, were found near Nag Hammadi, Egypt. And these became known as the Nag Hammadi Library, and though their stories vary widely, they all share a strong Gnostic orientation. Gnosticism was an important religious flavor in the Hellenistic and Roman worlds of the time. Many of the mainstream religions had a Gnostic aspect or subset to them, including ancient Judaism and also early Christianity. Whether Jesus was himself inclined towards Gnosticism, we will never really know. Some of the New Testament texts, especially the Gospel of John, include Gnostic language and perspective. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That obscure, mysterious, interesting beginning to the Gospel of John, that's Gnosticism. And you're like, oh, I kind of get it. Others locate Jesus wholly within mainstream Judaism or wholly outside of mainstream Judaism. Jesus' message and meaning shifted according to who was presenting him. Some of the documents found in 1945 at Nag Hammadi have nothing to do with Jesus, but many are Gnostic Christian texts centered on Jesus and his followers. And some of this Gnostic Christian scripture contains saying and stories that are also found in the Bible. And other of the Gnostic documents present new aspects of Jesus and his followers that are unknown and occasionally even antithetical to the ones that were ultimately codified by Irenaeus and others in the New Testament as we have it today. Are you with me so far? Okay. Then, in the 1970s, another codex was found in Middle Egypt, and it contained 4 texts that date generally to the early 4th century CE. And like the Nag Hammadi library, they were written in Coptic, which is a Greek-Egyptian hybrid language that was used then and is still used today. After a couple of decades of misadventure for those 4 texts, including many years in a safety deposit box in Hicksville, New York, followed by a disastrous sojourn in a freezer the works finally found their way into responsible and capable hands. And it was then confirmed and reconfirmed that part of what had been found was a Gospel of Judas. Until now, we only knew that such a gospel had once existed because Bishop Irenaeus trashed it in his work Against Heresies that was published around 180 CE. And this means that although the texts found in the 1970s date to about the 4th century CE, we know that some such text, some earlier version of the Gospel of Judas, necessarily had to have predated 180 CE when Irenaeus was trashing it, right? So the text already had to exist before then for him to be responding to it. Most scholars date the original text to between 140 and 160 CE. And this gospel seems to be the one he was attacking, though this particular copy of it is one of the oldest of the 4 that were found in the 1970s. The Judas gospel dates actually to about 280 CE. So I've thrown a lot of dates at you, because for those of you who are like, but when was this? I want you to feel like I'm giving you what we've got. Now, before we talk about this gospel in particular, it makes sense to review some very basic principles of Gnosticism. Gnosticism is based on the Greek word gnosis, Gnosis, which means knowledge. The knowledge Gnostics treasured was the understanding that there were 2 worlds. There was a blessed, sacred, orderly upper world that was patronized by a good and true God who existed only and completely in spirit and not in flesh, as indeed all that world did. And there was also a terribly, tragically flawed, lower, material world that had been created by a fallen, lesser god whose name was Yaldabaoth. At least that's that God's name in the Gospel of Judas, who never should have created the flawed world in the first place. Guess which domain is the one where humanity resides? This was part of how the Gnostics explained all the injustice and suffering in our world. It was literally misbegotten. According to this system of understanding, people were saved not by faith nor by works, but by knowledge, which they could only gain and appreciate if they had a divine spark in them, and not everyone did. A grain of grace that came from the upper world and that good, awesome, perfect God. So there's almost a kind of Calvinist foreshadowing here, right? That some people are born saved and some are not, and the ones who are not can't do a darn thing about it. Different Gnostic texts credit different people and beings with that salvific knowledge, including some highly controversial individuals. Jesus' role in these Gnostic accounts is often that of a divine emissary from that upper world who has come to awaken the divine spark and impart the necessary knowledge to allow enlightened followers to spurn this world for the real transcendent one upstairs and live according to its realities. And until the Gospel of Judas was found, probably the most controversial of Gnosticism's take on Jesus' enlightened followers was Mary Magdalene, who was honored by Jesus, according to Gnostic texts, with kisses and Gnostic secrets, and she was an actual apostle. In fact, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it says she was the wisest of his apostles. So that was pretty rad. And then the Gospel of Judas turned up. I don't know which is more rad. That's maybe conversation for your very exciting coffee hour today. Of course, even the Mary Magdalene stuff was a very heretical set of suggestions compared to the canonical Bible. But all Gnosticism was heretical, according to what was becoming then Orthodox Christianity, because not only did they embrace alternative histories and interpretations of Jesus, but more generally, if people were saved by knowledge, think about it. If people were saved by knowledge, then they had no need of bishops or priests. They had a direct connection to God that required no intermediaries or intercession. The Gospel of Judas begins by identifying itself as a secret account of the revelation that Jesus spoke to Judas Iscariot just before he celebrated Passover. So our timing is perfect. Passover begins sundown tomorrow. It acknowledges that Jesus performed miracles and wonders to help save humanity, and then it mentions his calling of the 12 disciples, although the gospel says that Jesus often appeared not as himself, but as a child to his disciples. And then, almost immediately in the text, which isn't very long, it's clear that even the disciples do not truly understand Jesus' message and the nature of this world and its God. And Jesus even laughs when he observes their worship, though he says that he is not laughing at them. The disciples, understandably, become upset. And the scene which ensues shows that only Judas Iscariot has the ability to understand Jesus' message. As often in the Gnostic Gospels, Jesus takes him aside and teaches him privately. And the more Jesus works with his disciples, the more their errors and lack of understanding become clear. In the end, Judas has some visions that show him the world to come, and Jesus confirms that vision for him, along with his destiny to sacrifice the man, which means the body, that clothes me, meaning Jesus. The world, according to the Gospel of Judas, is Sethian. In other words, it speaks of generations of humankind and believes that humans who have that divine spark are those of the generation who are descended from Seth, Adam and Eve's third son, because Seth was supposedly free of the taint of murder and gave humanity a fresh start. In this gospel, one of the heresies is that Jesus' role is that of a teacher, not a Messiah. Remember, it is not his death that saves, but information, knowledge, teachings. And really, though it begins with mention of Jesus performing saving miracles and actions for people, in what is left of the rest of the gospel, the only individual that it records Jesus saving is Judas. A very different and much more limited record of salvation. But in this gospel, Judas is also, even among the 12 disciples, the only one who seems to understand Jesus. Perhaps he is the only one who can be saved. The gospel ends not with Jesus' death, but with Judas's betrayal, which in this gospel is actually Judas's obedience to Jesus' will, and even a virtuous act, which will ultimately set Jesus free of his time in this flawed world. Remember, he's an emissary. He belongs somewhere else. It will even be good for Judas, though the text mentions that grief awaits him along the way. Judas's own death will free him also of this world and allow him to ascend to the true and blessed realm. This gospel was published in the spring of 2006 to great furor. James Robinson, who edited the first compiled publication of the Nag Hammadi Library, put out a book immediately afterwards called The Secrets of Judas, the story of the misunderstood disciple and his lost gospel. Time and Newsweek did cover stories on it. Even the New Yorker reviewed the Gospel of Judas and basically noted that Jesus does not come across very appealingly, though he laughs in this version more than once and in none other at all, which I had never noticed. For all his protestations, Jesus does indeed seem to be laughing at the ignorance of his earnest followers, and it doesn't endear him to us, though he certainly has other unendearing moments in the New Testament as well. Prophets are not always comfortable nor comforting. Jesus, though more kind than many, was not always kind. But Is Judas misunderstood? Is this gospel actually so revolutionary? Arguably, it fleshes the story out some, and it softens Judas's position by nuancing things differently. Here, Jesus casts Judas's action as a sacrifice rather than a betrayal, and also a gift, freeing Jesus from his service on this fallen plane of existence. And Judas obeys rather than betrays, and is represented as a loyal and uniquely insightful follower. Other disciples get angry at Jesus, not Judas, and others of the 12 cannot rise to Jesus' challenges, but Judas can and does, though always with becoming humility. But even in the canonical Gospels, it's clear that Judas, whether he will or no, is fulfilling God's plan, right? To which Jesus acquiesces. And if God is all-powerful, then Judas's will is actually a moot point, right? Jesus has to die, and it's going to happen a certain way, and Judas is a cog in that mechanism. In this gospel, Judas is sympathetic, and his motivation is that Jesus tells him to do it. In others, he is less sympathetic, and his motivation is either left unclear or it is for the infamous blood money, right? 30 pieces of silver. But even in this account, he receives money and then hands Jesus over. So for some interpreters, it's splitting hairs. There are beautiful lines in this gospel about stars and destiny and vision. There are deeply human considerations about laughter and who is laughing and why or why not. There is striving for understanding and failure to understand and slow enlightenment and instruction. There are words about the apocalypse and the end of time for all those unenlightened who are called stone upon which one cannot sow seed. There is one man, much maligned, who is shown to do the same action as always, but in an utterly different light. And there is another man, much beloved, who is shown to do his same actions, but in another light. Nowadays, we can easily find modern accounts of villains which show them actually to be heroes vilified by history or enemies. This makes it almost uncanny to read an ancient account that performs the same office. But this history is not a revisiting of the story of Mordred or Maleficent or historical figures like evil Prince John or Lizzie Borden or Alois Elias, the supposed Nazi puppet prime minister of Czechoslovakia, who was actually undermining them the whole time and working for the resistance. This story is a combination of history and faith. It's not utter legend on the one hand, and it is certainly not verifiable on the other. And so, for us Unitarian Universalists in particular, as always, the Gospel of Judas matters for what we find in it. So many of us don't believe in God at all, or certainly not in an all-powerful God. So the details of this story that attract our attention are different from what it will be for many. We find a slightly different Jesus here, different even from some of the other Gnostic gospel accounts. We find a somewhat different Judas. Whether we find, as Robinson suggests, a misunderstood disciple depends really on our larger vision of Jesus' life and meaning and those of his followers. What did we already think of them? What does this therefore do to inform that? The idea that what saves us is knowledge and understanding has a nice resonance for Unitarian Universalists. Indeed, it sounds much like some lines from Ralph Waldo Emerson, our own not always kind prophet. But the principle that only some may gain knowledge and others cannot, no matter what, is the kind of blanket condemnation that first gave rise to resistance in the form of universalism in the first place. We are not down with that. Postmodernism always wins out when it comes to Bible history. There is no one truth. There are contradictions even in that carefully codified New Testament. And there are certainly many more adjacent texts and evidence. The Judas Gospel doesn't finally reveal the true insider's story. It is simply another story. The fact that money is involved, even in this version, supports the idea that it actually maybe was involved. The fact that Judas is the betrayer suggests that he really was the one to do the informing. And the nature of what he did and why are still not entirely clear, though certainly even more intriguing now that these different motivations have been put forward. Perhaps apart from understanding the alternatives that the Gospel of Judas presents, we may best take away from it a reminder of some gnosis that we already possess. Things are not simple. And we don't always know everything that we think we know. And we don't know what history will know or think about us much later. For myself, these lessons charge me to continue to do my utmost to know what I need to know, to keep learning about myself and the world, misbegotten or not, and the people around me, and the people far from me, so that my living is as right as I can make it. What does this learning mean to each of us? To all of us, individually and together? These are questions worth considering, worth answering. And regardless of where we are theologically and what charge we receive from learning about the Gospel of Judas, at the very least, it is fascinating for its contents and its personal history, and miraculous that it is here at all to be spread before us on screens and paper pages in modern English. Look at the suffering of the text on your order of service. What a miracle that it survived at all. Thank you to the one who hid it long ago and who could have had no inkling of what the world would be like when we received it again almost 2,000 years later. May their efforts to preserve a different truth make a difference in our living. Amen. Our second hymn is number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Can we rise in body? No, it isn't. I'm sorry, I have 2 orders of service up here. That's not the right one. Thank you, 115. God of grace and God of glory. Number 115, can we rise in body or spirit and sing out as we are able? offering this morning will be benefiting the Amor Legal Fund, which goes toward paying legal fees and posting bond for immigrants who have been detained. Amor is an alliance of community organizations that work to counter state-sponsored violence against people who have been marginalized. Their work includes advocating with people caught in the immigration system to prevent deportations and connecting community members with mental health support and other healing services. Amor also plays a key role in supporting legislation to allow undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses, such as that which passed in 2022. First U and Amor have collaborated many times before. Members of Amor volunteered to support First U when we first offered sanctuary in our building to an undocumented family, and members of First U and Amor have helped each other provide asylum for asylum seekers, offering rides, resources, and community connections. This community connection for Amor's Legal Fund is an opportunity to continue collaborating and to support Amor's essential work holding the rights of immigrants and the dignity of every person. Please give as generously as you are able to this very important partner in our work to make our world, our state, and our region a better place for all. Thank you so much for all that you give and all that you do and all that you are. among the many ways we practice our faith, not only on Sunday mornings, I have these invitations for you. The exhibit Living While Black is being installed in our parlors this week in preparation for the artist talk and reception on May 4th. As we prepare the parlors for exhibit, we know that some may wonder about all the materials that are already on display in the parlors. Everything is going to come off the walls and be carefully wrapped and stored. When the exhibit is done in June, we will take some time to assess the walls, which are in desperate need of repair and paint, and come up with a long-range plan, both for doing the repairs and for deciding how materials and art, including our ministerial portraits, will be hung in the future. If you would like to know more about that, how that might play out, or contribute your ideas or concerns or hopes for that, please come to a Q&A session after worship, right after worship, in the parlors. In the parlors, is that right, Peter? Right, okay. It's not actually in here. Where? Oh, no, it is. It's at the end of the sentence. It's like German with all the verbs at the end. Come to a Q&A session today after worship or tomorrow, Monday, at 6 p.m. in the parlor. Today, you can still purchase tickets for the concert on May 3rd featuring Emma's Revolution, Holly Neer, Sally Rogers, and Claudia Schmidt. Sponsored by the Art in the Atrium Group, this will be a delightful evening of song. Since we are not here for worship next week, if you don't purchase tickets today, you can still do it online using the QR code on the posters. And we're not here for worship next week. Hopefully everybody knows that. Everybody at home, we are not here for worship next week. Why not? Because we are being hosted by the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, our good friends, together with Pastor Jenkins. We are being hosted by them, but together our congregations are going to be too big for their space. So all of us, Bethel and us, are going over, and this could be confusing, so I want to be very clear. First, you and Bethel are going to Temple Bethel. Right? It's all where the emphasis goes. First, you and Bethel are going to Temple Bethel on the other side of our zip code, that direction. So, and because of their schedules on the weekend, we're starting our service at a time that neither of our churches usually does start, which is 11. So there's plenty of time for brunch before. Not so much after. That's not a reason not to come. Do your brunch early. And then come to Temple Bethel. We're going to start promptly at 11 o'clock. I really hope everybody's going to be there. We're so grateful to Temple Bethel for welcoming us as warmly as they did. They made it super easy to make this change. So we just need to all hie ourselves over there and be ready to go at 11 o'clock. But it will be Bethel AME that is hosting us. When they were with us a few weeks ago, we did a typical UU service in a typical UU way with typical UU materials, and Pastor Jenkins and I shared the sermon. We're doing the same thing, but in reverse. So this is going to be a typical Bethel service with typical Bethel elements and typical Bethel music, and we're still going to share the sermon. So it's going to be really interesting to have a Black AME service in Temple Bethel, but isn't that exactly what interfaith camaraderie and connection and relationship is all about? Let's please remember the words that I don't think I will ever be able to quote enough from Pastor Jenkins. Integration without relationship is still segregation. We have relationships, and we are leaning hard into them next weekend. I hope that everybody can join us and be part of it. So there's nothing here. If you come, the nice thing is if you come here and you're like, oh no, you still have time to go to Temple Bethel because we would start at 10:30 and they're at 11. So lastly, there are only 10 days remaining to make your reservations for the first U Fellowship Retreat at Camp Aldersgate in North Scituate. Now, we need to have solid numbers to give them for lodging and meals. All the meals are included and provided, and the lodging is included. This means that we cannot extend the reservation deadline. So please make sure that you sign up by May 1st so you don't miss the fun. The staff are hearing from lots of people who are like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm totally going to do that. I'm going to get to that. I need to work out some stuff. I am going to go. But this is it. May 1st is it. So Make sure you don't miss the fun. First year members and staff are planning fun activities. There will be plenty of time to simply relax, and no requirement that really you do anything else if that's really all you want to do. You can register online. There's also a table in the atrium after worship that I will be at for a little while, and we'll have information and hard copy signups if you'd rather do it that way, okay? And that is everything. Our benediction is also taken from our hymnal this morning. When I was training for ministry, I trained with a wonderful, wonderful minister who had been Mennonite and changed to Universalist. And I remember when I was just starting, and I was like, I have to get everything. I have to get the hymnal opened and everything set really quickly. And he was always very zen. He was just like, I'm turning the page. And I was like, oh, that's so good. I'm sure I'll get there. Our closing lines are from Micah. How shall I enter the Eternal's presence? Shall I come with sacrifices, with yearling calves to offer? Would the Eternal care for rams in thousands or for oil flowing in myriad streams? What does the Eternal ask from you but to be just and kind and live in quiet fellowship with your God?
Now, if folks could join in our chalice extinguishing, the words of which are found in your order of service. We carry the flame of peace and love and hope until we meet again.
Closing song is May Love Be Your Guide on the blue card.